Welcome to Turmeric and Tequila with your host, Kristen Olson. Questioning a better way, one gracefully disruptive conversation at a time.
Welcome to Turmeric and Tequila. I am so excited to be with you here today. We've got an exciting part 2, which if you listen to Turmeric and Tequila, you know we don't do a lot of these. So when I have a guest come back on, we know that we had an awesome conversation one and we had to dig into some more. So we've got Dr. Abbie coming back to the mic, and these 2 conversations will release. So if you're listening, go listen to the first part of this convo, and then you'll be ready for the second part. But just to give you, before we do that, let's give some quick love to our sponsors, Lux Neuro, offering neurofeedback and counseling where your heart and mind align. For more information about what neurofeedback can do for you, listen to the neurofeedback stories of transformation in the middle of this podcast. Neurofeedback effectively treats everything from insomnia, anxiety, depression, trauma, ADHD, and much more. Special shout out to our one and only Declan James watches. They are local and veteran owned. 10% of all their proceeds go back to the Navy SEAL Foundation. So go check them out at declanjameswatchco.com. And our very own Colorado Clownfish Swim Club, where they believe in water safety and training for all ages. They believe in life skills through sports. So go waterproof your family today. ColoradoClownfish.com. They're crushing it. Dr. Abbie, she is a distinguished scientist and expert in human behavior, recognized by the U.S. Department of State as a top 1% specialist. She has provided behavior analysis training to elite units like the Internet Crimes Against Children, ICAC Task Force, including agents from the FBI, Secret Service, and DHS. She is a PhD in psychology. She became a professor at 23 and is now the director of education at Social Engineer LLC. She contributes to Forbes, Apple News, and has been featured on BBC News and Wired, all the things. Abbie, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Yes, I'm excited. We got all the energy today. We are going to unpack empowerment and limiting self-beliefs and some other things we didn't dive as deep into in part 1. And then she's got some projects coming out that we are going to touch on. But without further ado, it's 2025 now. We recorded our conversation in 2024. Abbie, why don't you just give us a quick recap or where you're at now kicking off this year in 2025, and we'll jump in.
Yeah, so it's an exciting year already. I have a new book coming out in June. A bit different than my first book. My first book was self-help, empowerment, shame, emotional regulation. And my new book is about influence and persuasion. This is the book that people expected from me. The first one was just such a real passion project. And this new book will be things like negotiation, leadership, nonverbals, interviewing, everything of that sort.
I love this. Well, this is probably something every podcast interviewer should have, that you're interviewing or being interviewed by, because it's an obvious communication piece verbally, but there are so many nonverbal cues. And usually it's a new conversation. Like we've had the pleasure now of talking a couple times, but you don't usually know the host. So I think it's always good, like social engineering between these conversations, because you just jump right in.
Yeah. And most of our perceptions of people are based on nonverbals, right? So we expect, say, I am trustworthy, so people will know that I'm trustworthy, but that's not actually the case. There's both sides of the coin. You've got the being and then you've got the perceiving. So if you're perceived as trustworthy through your nonverbals, but you're not, you can gain influence, but you're going to lose it. So it'll be short term. If you're not perceived as trustworthy, but you are, then you might not initially get that trust, and you might not have the door open for you because the nonverbals and that first impression isn't there. So it's really important to have both. It's not like if you have great nonverbals, then you're fine. You've got to understand how to be a good leader, how to be trustworthy, how to be competent, but you've got to have the door open first. And that's where the things like nonverbals come into play.
Okay, so no, why is this? I mean, obviously, this is important in communication. It's critical in all relationships. Why is this particularly passionate piece for you at this stage in the game?
So this was actually my roots, really.
Okay.
My first published paper that I did when I was 19 was on nonverbals, and it was always in the forensic field. And really similar to why I moved into positive psych in general when it comes to emotional regulation and trauma. I loved the dark side. It was fun and it was interesting and it was really great to understand like serial killer brains And my nonverbals were focused on deception detection and serial killers and things like that. But I didn't realize just how negative it was making me feel without realizing, in just really small ways. It was kind of leaking into my view of the world. And then when I started working with Joe Navarro, and he led me more towards the business side, and I realized that the application of my knowledge could be taken to leadership and negotiation. And I moved out of dark psych into positive psych, and things just started to feel happier because I was actually making a difference. And it's not that forensic psych doesn't make a difference, but I wasn't feeling the benefit of that. I wasn't actively helping people. And now when I'm working with CEOs or leaders, I can give them advice and I can see it play out in real time. And it's so rewarding. And it was that, and I see it too with my students. I can teach them information, and then I see them apply it in job interviews and things like that. And you get that positive feedback. And I realized I just love this space.
That is wildly fascinating. I have to ask this. Have you ever been in, like, a meeting or interview and be like, with just your average bear, and then you see, like, some sort of serial killer behavior or some red flag? Has that ever happened?
So with serial killer behaviors, there's no like one red flag.
Okay.
I have been in um, not an interview, but a date once, and had seen multiple warning signs of this person is someone who is definitely going to commit interpersonal violence, and had all of the makings that my research has shown of serial killers. And there was some evidence there of psychopathy related traits. And just from the way he was speaking and talking about his childhood and interests, it was a very big warning sign of I will remove myself from this situation very quickly.
Wow. Okay, just for my listening audience, I mean, maybe I'll change the title of this to "How to Save Yourself from Serial Killer." But what are, like, just like, I'm sure this is a whole podcast, but what are some quick things that people maybe should look out for?
Yeah, so it's not quite that simple when it comes
Okay.
to like, psychopathy is very rare. But psychopathy again doesn't necessarily mean that someone's going to be a serial killer. But let's frame it as dangerous
Mhm.
behaviors, potential violence, because that's really what we're looking for. And it's just in serial killers extreme. So obviously, childhood trauma is one factor that we do tend to see very often. Doesn't mean if someone has it, they're going to be violent, but it is common. Now, the biggest factor, one factor that I say do not ever, ever overlook is how they treat animals. The
Yes, that's big
one
on my
factor
radar
that
anyways.
I have
Yeah.
always seen, if somebody can commit harm, purposeful harm to an animal, that is the biggest red flag. That is the only behavior that I found in my research that is almost always predictive of later violence. If they, and it doesn't mean that they go out and like accidentally, but if you go out purposefully and enjoy it, now that's a warning sign. So
Ugh.
this is why when it comes to people who go out hunting and shooting, they're always a little bit of a red flag on my radar. Again, doesn't mean that they absolutely will, because there can be a bit of an emotional buffer when it comes to this is a feeding.
Mhm.
So if it's
Intention.
an animal you're going to shoot to eat, our animal instincts can kind of take over. So the mentality isn't there because you're not doing it necessarily for pleasure. Another instinct overrides of this is I'm doing it because we're going to eat this. If it's a cat, a dog, a bird, or an animal that you're not doing for a specific purpose of eating, say people that go out hunting for sport, that is a big red flag.
Yeah.
And then you couple that with emotional, a lack of emotional intelligence, evidence of low empathy, big warning signs, low empathy and harm to animals. If an individual has those two characteristics, for me, I remove myself entirely because they're two big warning signs that they don't care about how you feel and they enjoy committing harm to something that is harmless.
Ugh. Well, that I have 3 rescue dogs. So if anything, if you don't love dogs from the
Yeah.
get-go, that's an immediate turn for me. But
Yeah.
I even remember hearing back in the day, Jeffrey Dahmer, usually it started, he was like harming squirrels, like you saw early behavior. So
Yeah.
we will hard segue out of this convo so we don't all get depressed. But I think that's really good intel, because in this day and age, when you're going on like blind dates or internet dating or just meeting people at conferences, like you just don't know so much around people. So I couldn't applaud more the idea of this heightened awareness of these nonverbal
Yes.
cues and your environment around you. And I mean, I'm curious on this, just your own intuition. Like when you meet someone, you're like, God, I just don't get a good vibe. I can't explain it. I don't know what it is, but there's just something off. Is that part of the teachings at all?
Yeah, so we have a process called neuroception, and we all have this. It's an evolved process that is absolutely vital to survival. And what it simply means is our nervous system is constantly scanning the environment, always, unconsciously sending us signals. Because if we picked up on everything consciously all the time, we would be overwhelmed. So our brain does this unconsciously in the background through our peripheral vision and sends us signals of everything is safe or things are unsafe. So, when you go into a meeting or say you meet someone new or you're in a situation, you just get this funny feeling in your tummy of, something isn't right, but I don't know why. Or you step into a situation, and it's not that there's someone there, but something doesn't feel right. What that is our nervous system picking up on something and sending a signal to the brain saying danger. And a lot of the time, what we're picking up on when it's a person is inappropriate nonverbal behaviors or slight behaviors that seem suspicious, but again, we're not consciously picking up on that. And when you are training influence and persuasion, you pick up on subtle things that people do. So people might subtly be trying to manipulate you or influence you, and your nervous system is feeling something's wrong, but because you're not really consciously aware, it's hard to translate that feeling. And again, with nonverbals, if you don't necessarily know what you're looking at, it's hard to logically say, yes, something is wrong. So
Right.
when we're training nonverbals and again, emotional intelligence and emotional regulation, you're able to pick up on those signals that your body is sending and turn the unconscious to conscious. Not everything, but to a much higher degree. And again, that's why emotional regulation, like what we talked about before, all of it is related. Because we talked before about understanding your emotions and being able to ground yourself and things like that. If you're in a situation when you're getting those feelings, one question I get a lot is, how do I know the difference between a gut instinct and a trauma response?
Hmm.
And it's not often talked about because a trauma response is going to feel uncomfortable. Say you have experienced something really horrible in your past, maybe something like a sexual assault or something truly traumatic. Your nervous system is going to be on absolute overdrive all the time. So if you go into a situation that other people might find comfortable, but you're uncomfortable in general, it can be really hard to differentiate between threat and just a trauma response. So understanding how to read your emotions, like if it feels instant and overwhelming, it's probably not a gut instinct. Gut instincts are more subtle. If it feels like I have to absolutely act now, and there's no logical reason why, that's more likely to be a trauma response. A gut instinct is kind of that more slow burn feeling of,
Mhm.
something isn't quite right. So if it is a little bit overwhelming, being able to ground yourself, like we talked about before, and practice that emotional regulation can help identify between the two.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Cause I think there's that fine line is very fine. Like you don't know the
Yeah,
difference.
really
But
fine.
yeah. But I would almost always err on the side of, then if something's there, probably remove yourself from the situation. Is that what you guys would suggest?
Yeah, it's always good to err on the side of caution for sure,
Yeah.
because it's better to risk leaving a situation than staying in one that could be dangerous. Absolutely. I always say trust your gut,
Yeah.
but at the same time, that's why I teach emotional regulation, because if you're in that situation, it is really important to understand how to ground yourself and how to try and calm your nervous system, because really, we want the best for people. We want to see people succeed. And say you're going into a networking event or you're going into a date, and we want to see people thriving and happy and living their best lives. But if you're constantly listening to these signals saying, hey, something's wrong, when nothing is actually wrong, you're going to end up self-sabotaging by accident. And you're going to end up limiting your opportunities. And we don't want to see that. We want to see people being able to interact comfortably and work through those emotions. So, whilst you're doing that, always err on the side of caution, but be working on those emotional regulation skills at the same time.
So well said. And that's, I think, the juxtaposition that we try and exist here on
Yeah.
Turmeric and Tequila, because it's both sides of things. And
Yeah.
I do think you have to be naive in some capacity to have faith in this world and show up and believe in the good of
Yes.
people, because there's
Yeah.
really, I do think the good outweighs the bad. And you just have to be hyper aware of what's going on, because that, the bad does exist. Well, on that note, it's kind of a perfect segue, because we can then talk now about empowerment and limiting self-beliefs, because I think that comes right into it. And I do a ton with influencers, and leadership and influence for good is the most beautiful thing. I mean, that's kind of getting
Yeah.
back to faith. I'm certainly not a traditionally, church type faithful person, and I still believe in larger order. What are some things that you highlight or specifically lean into around limiting self-beliefs as a public speaker, as a leader, or
Yeah.
facilitating influence for good?
One of the most important things is the way we talk to ourselves,
Mm-hmm.
because our self-talk affects our hormonal response patterns. So saying I can't do what I can't do it has been shown to increase cortisol levels. So that there's been studies showing individuals who are playing professional sports, the way they talk to themselves before a game can affect their performance, because cortisol affects how your muscles respond. So it affects your muscle rigidity and things like that. So if you're saying I can't do it, I can't do it, or I'm not going to be good enough, it's not going to go well, but let me do it anyway, you're increasing the likelihood that it won't go well, because you are physically limiting yourself. If you say, I've got this, I can do this, we're going to smash it, you're not excreting that cortisol in the same way. So you're actually giving yourself a better chance to do so. And if you do have a lot of anxiety before, say, public speaking, get it out.
Yeah.
You don't have to pretend you don't. I remember before my first TED Talk, I was so nervous. I paced up and down, because me saying to myself, no, I'm not nervous, I'm not nervous, the anxiety is there. And you need a way to get it out. And whether that is talking to yourself and subtly listening to your cues and saying, no, based on the last time I did this, it went well, and talking yourself out of it. I tried those and it just wasn't working for me. Physically, my body needed to get out that energy. So I pace. And then I pace right up until they call my name. And then I go on stage and I feel good. And I remember I was pacing so much, I was making the host nervous, because he was looking at me and he was like, are you okay? And I said, yeah, I'm okay. Because I knew for me, this was a technique that worked, because I had that pent up energy, and just pacing backwards and forwards allowed me to get it out rather than it bottling up, staying in my head. Because imagine it, if you have all this energy, it needs to come out somewhere. And if you're saying it doesn't exist, what do you think is going to happen? When you're trying to remember your words, it's going to be all muddled. So finding something that works for you rather than denying the fact that you have that anxiety. And I remember prior to the speech, we were in the waiting room, and there were 3 of us that were very nervous, and one that was like, I'm not bothered, like I don't get nervous at all. And who do you think was rated the lowest? The one that wasn't nervous. And this is consistently shown in research. When people say, no, I don't feel nervous, I don't feel anxious, they're consistently rated the worst. People who admit, yeah, I'm nervous, they're the ones that are consistently rated the highest, because they're honest with themselves and they can work through that emotional response rather than suppressing. And it's a passion thing. If you're not nervous, well, anxiety and excitement really do come hand in hand. So if you have no nerves, are you really wanting it enough to be giving it your best? Because a little bit of a negative emotion is really good to keep you challenged. and keeping you challenged means you're going to really push for that performance. So really the advice is don't deny to yourself your emotion, because denying it to yourself is just going to limit yourself.
100%. I like the pacing in the beginning. I usually work out before something because then I'm just too tired to
Yeah.
be too nervous. But number 1, you get your steps in, and 2, you can transfer all the
Yep.
energy you're
Yep.
nervous,
And one
throw it on
thing,
someone else.
yeah. One thing that has been shown to be effective for speakers, and exams and anything where you've got something you've been long-term practicing for, is the 48 hours before practice right up until that point. Really, you don't cram, but practice, practice, practice. And then the day before, maybe run through it once, relax. Because the
Yeah.
day before is when your nervous system is going to be at heightened anxiety. So you're going to be at your lowest capacity to actually take in that information. So what you want to do is really focus on calming down your nervous system, so that you step into the next day, you practice it all the way through, because you might think, well, I'm losing a day of rehearsal. It's not going to be in your short-term memory at that point. And if it's not in your long-term memory by 24 hours before, it is not going to be in your long-term memory the day before. That's why rehearsal should start 6 weeks beforehand. So that day before, work on making your nervous system calm. Get a massage, go for a walk, do things that you enjoy to take your mind off of it. And then that day, early in the morning, run through it once, maybe twice if you need to, and then go out and do it.
I love that. I know my athletes will resonate with this because it's just like even that few days before, if you've got a big athletic competition, there's no gains to be made in those few
Yes,
days, or let alone few hours prior. Like if you're ready, you're ready. And if you're not, you're
yes,
not. So I do like that. Again, that kind of that balance of being just nervous or slightly fearful, so it
yeah,
motivates you to compete, to show up, to care, to show that real human emotion. And I don't think this is talked about enough that you touched on is the being confident, like believing, the
yeah.
self-belief, the positive talk. I think there's such a line between cockiness and being confident, but if you're going to go out there and be an authoritarian and share something, you've got to come, I feel like, with your whole chest, with your whole heart, and believe it. Otherwise that authentic space is never going to transfer. Do you have any like good tips or tricks or like mindset where it's you are embracing that confidence, but then you're not edging into cockiness?
Yeah, well, one thing that is a limit for us is, well, we have on both sides. We're told to be humble. Especially women are really pushed into, oh, it's frozen.
Okay, you
Oh,
just came back.
okay. I'll just start again in case so we can edit that if needed.
Perfect.
Um, on both sides, there's the extreme, because especially women, we're told we need to be humble. So
Mhm.
there's this inner need to push yourself down. And then we have these negative notions and misguided notions of empowerment, which means as I am now is perfect. So you've got the two extremes. And this notion of empowerment of I'm perfect as I am is really damaging, because it means that unhealthy behaviors may be engaging in, we're promoting. And we're promoting overconfidence. And when we say I'm perfect as I am and I don't need to change, we're actually limiting people. Because if you recognize, hey, I have flaws, you can pinpoint where are areas you need to improve on. So if you do admit, hey, I have these
Mhm.
character flaws, hey, I have these things I struggle with, you can identify the areas that might need more improvement. And that is, again, like I said, the two extremes. If you're told, okay, be humble, and there's something you're like, I'm really good at this, but you want to be humble, so you kind of suppress it down, again, you're limiting yourself. And then if you say, no, no, I'm really, really good at this, but you don't actually have the competence in this thing, you have overcompetence. And again, you're limiting yourself because you're not giving yourself the space to grow. So trying to have those reality checks with yourself of recognizing when other people are speaking down to you, and recognizing when you're really pushing your own gift down. If you find yourself doing something and feeling like, oh, I shouldn't share this, or I don't want to toot my own horn, hoot it. Because one of the things that has been shown really effective in leadership is being open about your achievements. if you do something great, how are people going to know? And if you're going to be a leader and if you're going to be a speaker, you want people to understand that the words you say carry impact. So you need to carry impact. So don't shy away from your own achievements. Don't shy away from tooting your own horn. Absolutely. But as you said, there's always that balance. Recognize that being empowered doesn't mean you are perfect as you are. Have check ins with yourself. Ask for feedback. Genuinely ask for feedback from people that you know care about you. But one thing I will say, a real piece of advice I really hope that anyone that does media follows, don't read the comments.
Yeah.
Love someone that cares about you, read the comments, because they can translate to you the information that you need to know. If there are comments about things that are consistently done wrong or consistent comments about something, translate those to you so you can work on them. But the comment section of videos can be a horrible place.
Yeah.
And I know this as a woman because I remember I did my first Wired video and I was really excited and I read the comments. Every single comment that mentioned me mentioned my body. None of the comments that mentioned me said anything about my information. I was there as a scientist. The male that I was there with, Joe Navarro, all of the comments were about his information. None of the comments mentioned his body. And that made me feel really bad. And I didn't need to carry that emotion because it didn't really help me. It didn't do anything to make me better. And I've learned that, and I've done political talks, and people just want to rip apart the speaker for things that are irrelevant because it's a political topic. So not reading the comments and having someone that cares about you translate important information is something that I really advise, especially novices.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there is still such this conscious conversation of, male speakers versus female speakers, or, women on camera versus men on camera. And there's a lot of hurt people in the world that want to pass on that hurt. And now with social media and
Yeah.
YouTube, there's such this new communication point that you can do behind a wall. So there's almost no accountability in it. So I agree with you of shutting it off. I think feedback is fabulous. It keeps you humble. Again, my athletes, we know, there's no real mountaintop. There's always going to be somebody bigger, faster, stronger. And it's just like the business world. So you have to stay in that mix of constantly staying humble and staying hungry. And my biggest trick for that is just to get around people that are better than you, train with better athletes, be around smarter people, and keep your edges sharp. For my people that are looking, to try a new thing, like I told you before we got on the mic, public speaking is going to be big for Turmeric and Tequila and myself in 2025. And we're really going to try and get out there in real life and get back in front of people, which I love. If you're trying something new and you've got these negative beliefs or limiting self-beliefs, do you have a good mindset trick or something you do to help lean into that positive space where you can positively motivate or gain the trust of others?
Yeah, well, a lot of the time, those negative beliefs are because of a lack of something. So, if you have really strong imposter syndrome, it's important to recognize that to a degree, it's natural because it's new. And anytime you go to do a new skill, like public speaking is a skill, it's going to be a period of learning where you're not absolutely your best because you can't be, because you're not practiced. So recognizing that that is going to occur is important, but don't over exaggerate how much that plays into your nerves because a lot of the time your anxieties are telling you something. So listen to them. So if you're really nervous about how something might go, or you're nervous about this or that, it might be because you're actually lacking in that area. So a lot of the time, extreme anxiety is actually just a lack of preparation. So a lot of people don't prepare and they wing things and then wonder why they're nervous. Or they're preparing, but they're not really structured in the way that they're preparing, or they go, no, I'm going to cram. And we know from neuroscience research and just common sense that cramming doesn't work. If you want something to really be remembered, it needs to be in your long-term memory, which takes a lot of time. So preparing and knowing your limitations too. So with people who are people pleasers or super ambitious, and this is something I have personally had to work on because I'm a highly ambitious person. Something you want to do is do everything. You want to
Yeah.
take on everything, but we are limited with the amount we can take on. And you have to remember that what you give to, you take away from, because we only have a certain amount of time. So if you're taking on too much and you're feeling really nervous, it's not because you're unable to do these things, but you're unable to do them all at once. So pick the things that really matter to you, because you're going to be too stretched. So you're absolutely not going to be able to perform at your best because you're not able to give those things your all. So really just being realistic with yourself about what are my limitations and how much time do I have, and trying to not suppress your ambition, but just rein it in a little bit with some realism of, okay, I want to achieve all these things, but maybe I don't have to achieve them all at once. And there's a really common mindset that I see, especially in this new generation, of feels like time is running out, feels like you have to do everything all at once. And it goes back to our conversation before about feeling like we should be achieving all of these things because that's what social media says success looks like. And that can be a really overwhelming feeling of, I have to do it all now, because if I don't meet this amount of money or this goal at this age or this time, I'm a failure. So scrapping that should and just understanding, what are my realistic personal limitations?
Opportunity cost. It's funny. I wrote
Yeah.
something. I mean, I don't know how much you remember from college, but I don't remember a ton. And I remember I was in like Econ 102 or something. And he's like, oh, if you guys write something that you learned this year, a quick essay will bump your grade up a half, from a B to a B plus or whatever. And I wrote it on opportunity costs. And it was like the most realist thing that I've had to learn, 25 years later, of like,
Yeah.
you can't, like, if you give towards something, you give up the opportunity to do something else. And it's something that's just resonated in my life. So it's a funny like irony that's always existed out here that we still kind of
Yeah.
try to continue to learn. Do you feel like you got pretty good at doing a lot though?
Yes. So there's a quote that I really love, and it says, if you don't sacrifice for what you want becomes a sacrifice. Because I have had students come to me all the time. This was when I was a professor, or even when I was a PhD student, because I had achieved a lot at that point. And I have people come to me now all the time saying, I wish I had your career so young. And I say that quote of sacrifice because they ask how I got here, and I say sacrifice. We are limited, and you have to decide what is it that you want, because everything is achievable. If you want to be a rocket scientist, you can figure out what the steps down are. You want to be a CIA agent? Absolutely, figure out the steps down. But to get to each step, you have to give a certain amount. And I have got to where I am very young because I am willing to pour my time into it, which means I take my time off from other things. So when I have people say that to me, I say, okay, do you like going out? Do you like socializing? Do you like having relationships? Do you like these things? And how often do you do them? And then I say, okay, so you wouldn't like my life, because the way that I work is I get up very, very early in the morning and I have a very intense workout. And then I sit at my desk and I work full speed all day. I have my lunch and my dinner in my office. And then I go to bed. And then I repeat that 7 days a week. And I say, does that sound like a life that you enjoy? For me, it's my peace. I am happy this way. I love being this way. But if you don't enjoy that, then you don't want my life. We take parts of people that we see and we create this perception of what their life must be like. And we go, I really wish I had that, and what I have isn't enough. But you don't realize the sacrifices that go into that. Because if you're not willing to sacrifice your relationship, then that time you spend with that person, you take away from time you could be working in your job. And I remember I was watching a speech by Jordan Peterson, and he was talking about being a top 1% exceptional scientist. And he said, you think you want to be top 1%, but do you? Because what it takes to be at that point of being an exceptional scientist means you are at war every day with everyone else that wants your place. And you have to work harder and work more efficiently and just give more time than everyone around you consistently. And do you want that? Because most people don't realize the reality of those things. And I say this with my sister because she's so happy in her life. And she loves her balance. She has her home life balance and her career balance, and she spends half the amount of time working that I do, but she is so happy because there is no right way. And
Mhm.
idolizing someone's career achievements, but not recognizing maybe the way I live my life is actually much happier than if I had their life. That is a really important reality that we need to recognize. It's all about sacrifice. And don't feel like your life is less than or you are less than because you don't have these things. Because if you had them, would you truly be happy with living your life that way?
Yeah, amen. And I think, yeah, that's that whole mental health conversation of comparison and
Yeah,
social media and all everything we see is the highlight reel. So you never see it. I know so
yeah,
many people are like, the drunk guy at the bar. It's like, if I trained 7 days a week, I could be in the NFL. And it's like, yo, not even like you don't have
yeah,
any idea what goes in for these athletes or
yeah,
speakers or scientists to be at the top. It runs your world. And I often think, even we don't make our own choices, universe looks out like maybe you didn't get the job for the reason or you didn't marry
yeah,
that person for a reason, and then it kind of looks out for something you ultimately want that you didn't know you wanted.
yeah. And we don't realize how much our perception can be inaccurate.
Yeah.
And I had a reality of this very recently. I was with a friend of mine and she was introducing me to a new partner. And after I left, he was saying to her, "Wow, you can tell that, Dr. Abbie comes from money." And she said, "Why would you say that?" And he said, "Well, just by the way she carries herself, you can tell she came from a very privileged background." And my friend laughed and she said she came from nothing. She did not have she did not have money growing up. We would as kids put money on the electric. So our electric would run out and it would run out so much that we would make a game of lighting the candles when we had no electricity because it's a sleepover in the lounge. And eventually the government also took our home from us. So we ended up not having a family home. And I never came from money and I didn't come from a privileged background. And I fought tooth and nail for everything that I have in my life. And, we spoke before about I was a drug addict at 16 years old, but I have built this person now that is very different from where I came from. So people's perception of me based on how I show up in that moment isn't where I came from always. So you see a snippet of a person and you build a reality around them. And that's what we do on social media. And what it does to us is make us feel like, in comparison to that person, we're not enough.
Mhm.
And actually, you don't really know that person. So you're making yourself feel less than to an unreality because they don't
Right.
exist. And it was in that moment when she told him, and she was like, he had a moment of this reflection where it's like the reality kind of shattered and you have that realization of we really don't know
Yeah.
influences, and these people making us feel like I'm not earning enough, I don't really know how much they earn,
Right.
and these people making me feel like I'm not doing enough, I don't really know what they do day to day and I don't really know their character or anything about where they've come from. So when we realize that, especially with celebrities,
Oh
we
yeah.
idolize celebrities, we don't know anything about them. We
Mm-mm.
don't know them as people, and we feel like we do based on interviews, but we don't. So don't focus on me versus them. Just focus on, are you happy? Are you
Yeah.
fulfilled? What brings you joy? What makes you feel like you're making an impact? Scrap the comparison to other people because does that version of them actually exist?
Absolutely. I think one of the most beautiful things that have come through, not only for my podcast, but in general, you get to know and have those deeper conversations with
Yeah,
people. And the number one thing I always say is everyone is going through something or they've overcome something. Every
yeah,
human has a story, and you have no idea what they bring to the table. And we're so good at masking or creating or showing up or healing in a way that where you can't see these things, but you truly have
yeah,
no idea what's going on. And that could even be with like a sibling or someone close to you that we do really have to continuously practice that idea of you don't know what's coming up, and there's so much to learn there if you do start asking the right questions. That
yeah.
that's good. Did you tell your friend that that was like a red flag from your behavioral studies?
Yeah, I laughed because we all do it.
Okay.
And it's
Yeah.
not necessarily a red flag. We all make initial judgments and it's good thin slicing. But he was so grounded in his
Yeah.
almost like really proud of it. And it just shattered a little bit. But this is why it is really important to have that understanding of everyone's going through something. And especially as a leader, it's important to recognize that everyone below you is going through something. And something I always say is, it feels when we're going through difficult things, it feels like we are the center of the universe. And we are not necessarily responsible for what happened to us, but we are responsible for how we treat people when we're in that state. Because we forget that everybody is going through it too. So we try and justify, why I'm moody or irritable or why I mistreat someone because I'm going through this. But so might they be.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not necessarily responsible for your suffering, but you are responsible for your reactions to it. You are always responsible for your behavior. And if you genuinely cannot regulate yourself, remove yourself, because you don't know what anybody else is carrying. You might say you know the situations they've been through, you still don't know the depth of their suffering. So always making sure you bring empathy to the table.
There you go. Empathy and grace, I think, when
Yeah.
in doubt, holding that space. On that note, of course we can go on and on because I have a million more questions as we do. But I had mentioned before I jumped on, this year with TNT, we're really focusing on, turmeric and tequila is kind of like this juxtaposition of balance, poking the bear. But really, I want people to feel empowered to go live life their way, challenge status quo, etc. What is like the biggest message you have with all your research and studies and incredible conversations and getting to know so many people around empowerment? Like, is there one thing that really makes people feel empowered or something you'd want to know around being empowered? Because I think now more than ever, personal responsibility and accountability is like the ticket to 2026.
Yep. The one thing I always say is bad behaviors don't make you a bad person. We do a bad thing and we get tied to it as, because I did a bad thing, I am bad person. And therefore, what's the point in trying to change because I'm just inherently bad? You can do bad things, but it doesn't make you bad. You can always change and you can always grow, but you have to be willing to face why you did them. Dig deep to understand why you did them so you can start to unravel those patterns. But don't pin yourself as, I can't change, or I'm not going to be good enough because of things I've done in the past. It's the beauty about time. Whether it's your best day, your worst day, it's just going to keep going. So why wouldn't you want to change and improve? There's always a chance to change and improve.
Absolutely. I think life is so short and life is
Yeah.
also long. Like you got
Yes.
a lot of laps to run to truly be great at anything.
Yeah.
And staying in that humble loop, because if you're not, and also if you're not out there failing, I feel like you're also not living. Like that complacency, which you kind of
Yeah.
touched on earlier, is the kiss of
Yeah.
death.
And failing is a learning lesson. If you see failing as, I'm a failure, then it's just going to hold you back. I think I've never failed at anything in my life, but I've definitely lost a lot.
Yeah.
Because if I see it as a fail, it means I learned nothing from it. There's been so many times that I've not succeeded at something, but I took something from it and then I kept moving forward. And I think when you're ambitious, I've had many doors shut in my face, but I'm going to keep knocking. But each time I knock, I'm going to have learned something from the last time. So it doesn't make me a failure because I've been turned down or knocked down or anything like that. All it means is I haven't yet reached it. And I think when we make that the goal, that growth mindset instead of a fixed mindset, it's going to make our life so much better because we're going to stop putting ourselves in these boxes and these cages.
Absolutely. It's and I think that's where like the true authenticity and the empowerment
Yeah.
comes. Like if you think about all the things you've
Yeah.
gone through and you've learned, you're like, "Oh shit, I've actually done a lot. I should feel empowered. I should feel confident taking the stage or taking the mic or taking the field because you have run these laps." And I think those things are so empowering and ethos for yourself to be like, "Oh, you know what? I've actually done a lot of shit. Let's go."
Yep. And that's why I define empowerment as, you can't use me against me. Because there are things, lots of things in my past that embarrass me that I have done. But because I've recognized those, I've worked on, why did I do them? How can I change from them? If people throw them at me, yeah, it's going to be embarrassing because it doesn't represent who I am now. But do I feel shame? Absolutely not. I learned from them. And
Yeah.
actually, it makes me feel proud of how far I am from them. And that's a really hard point to reach. And again, that's why those myths about being untouchable are so important to scrap, because you can't use me against me. You can't make my past mistakes make me feel like I'm a bad person, because I recognize good people do bad things and I work on being a good person. But I'm also realistic of, it doesn't feel good when I remember that I did them. I still harbor negative emotion from them. I just don't feel deep shame. If I was to take these myths about empowerment of being untouchable, I would be lying to myself and I'd be lying to the audience. You can't make the behaviors go away. You can't make the past go away. What happened, happened. Whether it happened because of you or it happened to you, it still happened. There will be a residue of negative emotion, regardless what that emotion is. Face that reality, but learn from them, take accountability, and grow and accept it internally, so you can move forward and say, yeah, you can't hurt me with it, because I recognize I can still grow and be the person that I want to be regardless.
Write all of this down right now. All I can think of is I don't know if you saw 8 Mile with Eminem, and they do the rap
One
battle
of
and
my
he's
favorite films.
yeah. Well, so and he spins it and he's like, I'm a white boy, I'm poor, I'm this. And
Yeah,
like he puts all the disses out in front. And so like there's nothing else to
yeah,
say. So it kind of
yeah.
sums it up.
Yeah, I put that in. I think I might even have referenced 8 Mile in my book, because in
Okay.
my introduction I said, you can't use this, because if you want to tell my story, fine, let me tell it to you.
Yeah.
And then you do with that what you will, because now my story is out there. And if you want to throw things I've done, I'm like, fine, I know, I told you. What, you can't hurt me with me, because I've accepted me. And I think I did use that as an example, because it is great. If you accept your flaws, it doesn't mean that you're flawed to the core. It means you're human. We make mistakes. We are not perfect. How boring would it be if we were all perfect and never made a mistake? And if you accept that, people can't hurt you with that. It's when you're deeply insecure and you're trying to be perfect and you think that perfect is obtainable, that when people throw those parts of you at you, it's going to sting so hard and it's going to get you at the core. Drop that idea of perfect. Drop that idea of never making a mistake, never failing at anything. Drop all of those ideas. And it doesn't make you untouchable, but it makes you, and I think I said before that I don't use the term bulletproof, I use bouncy. It makes you resilient, because it's going to have some negative emotions, but you bounce back. And that's the goal, not to be perfect or bulletproof. Be bouncy and be realistic with yourself.
There you go. I think you have to manifest maybe Eminem opening up for you one of these days and like a big speech or something. Have him come out,
Absolutely.
just shake up the whole game. Because I feel like we got to liven up public speaking in general. So we'll put that into universe.
Yeah.
Tell us, like I said, I have a million more questions, but tell us about the project coming out in June, your
Yep.
book, and anything else we need to know, where to find you. Give us the details.
Yep. So my book is called The Upper Hand. Very excited. Like I said, this is the book that everybody was asking for when I gave them a self-help book. So I have listened. So I'm really excited about this. It comes out on the 1st of June. I also have 2 kids' books coming out. These are books that all of the profits will go to the nonprofit. No profits will be taken. They all go straight to the nonprofit. And the book is for 3 to 6-year-old, and it teaches them in a really fun story way how to identify predatory behavior without it feeling like an intense predatory book. Fun story about animals, but there's learning lessons where we've taken scientific concepts about predatory behavior so kids learn to model safety behaviors. And all the profits will go to the Innocent Lives Foundation, who help to catch child predators and get them put behind bars, working with federal law enforcement. So I have those projects coming out. I have my book. And all of my updates can be found on my website, which is abbiemaroño.com or drabbieofficial.com. And it's doctor as in DR rather than spelt like doctor, because that was taken. So drabbieofficial.com or abbiemaroño.com. And then my socials are Dr. Abbie Official.
Oh, so many things going on. I love the energy and I love the mission. You have an open invitation on TNT because we got a lot to continue to touch on. And I love that you're addressing our youth. That's a constant conversation here. So we'll probably unpack that down the road as well. But check out all that Dr. Abbie has going on, books and socials and all the things. It's very relevant conversations. And I think it's for all ages, all levels to really lean in, particularly our leaders. So Dr. Abbie, I really genuinely appreciate your time and energy. Be sure to go check us out on wherever you get your podcast. And this video will be on YouTube. Like and subscribe, do all the things. I want to say thank you to our sponsors, Lux Neuro, Neurofeedback and Counseling. Go check them out at luxneuro.com and Colorado Clownfish Swim School. They are, I believe, in water safety and training for all ages. Go waterproof your family at coloradoclownfish.com. We are out here. We're doing our thing. Let's go 2025. Cheers to our leaders. Dr. Abbie, we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining Turmeric and Tequila with your host, Kristen Olson. Tune in next time, and don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen.